have some great HOA and terrible neighbor stories for you today. You're going to love that title story. Here's our first one. Keeping me up at night with your parties? Enjoy being shamed on the national news. Posted by, I hope I don't butcher this, Vlokinen Ventiluren. I'm sorry if I did. In September of 2020, the apartment next to mine was let out to two young women, both students. After they settled in for a bit, it turned out that they wanted to have a party. No big deal, except Belgium was in full lockdown at this point due to COVID, and you were supposed to have only one fixed visitor over. But then again, to be young again and so on, so I didn't really care. During this time, I was working in healthcare. I work with the mentally disabled, but I volunteered for the ad hoc COVID team, meaning that I got called upon to tend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining or were effectively diagnosed with COVID. This meant pretty long working hours, and I spent about 10 to 11 hours a day at work with a full hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was pretty tired pretty much all of the time. So I wasn't looking forward to the noise from a party, but I'm pretty chill and I know that living in the city, some noise is to be expected. So they are having their party and I can stand some noise and music. But this party was freaking wild. People shouting full on, in the hallway, wrecking things and so on. And at about 4 in the morning, I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company, about 20 people or more, to leave. And if they could refrain from having a party the next day, as I have to get to work and get up at 6 every day. So they promised they would keep it down the rest of the night. They didn't, and that they would not have a party the next day. Plot twist, they did have another party, and then they had one the day after. At this point, I'd been going on a full 3 nights without sleep and I was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls and every night they would be full of apologies and stuff, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place because it would be absolutely packed with people and I work with some very vulnerable people at work who I wouldn't want to spread COVID to. This was pre-test, pre-vaccine, pre-much of knowledge that we have now about COVID. Luckily, the weekend came and they went to their parents and I could recover a bit. Suffice to say, I wasn't really liking my new neighbors. During the next few weeks, they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people just coming over during the night. And by constant, I mean constant. Like their bell would ring 70 times a night and people would just always be coming and going. And those people would be drunk and loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone and any noise will travel throughout the building. Basically, I couldn't rely on sleeping at night, and it drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday because then they would go off to their parents or whatever. I could not grasp how they could know this many people that would always be coming and going. During one night, while knocking on their door to complain about the noise, I encountered my upstairs neighbor, who's also on Reddit, hi, and decided that we would have to join forces to get this to stop. My neighbor told me some important bit of information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was because they used their apartment as a makeshift bar and hangout. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID, and all of those students were using the big apartment to hang out. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 boys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends or whatever. And the boys from across the street would also come over 15 times a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them. Basically, our communal hallway was just a part of their cafe space now. So we tried talking to the girls, and then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us when we were asking them to just be quiet at 4 in the morning. Most of them just laughed at us, as we were the pesky neighbors, no doubt. Even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So we started calling the police dozens of times. Most of the times, they weren't let in and police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Belgium was still in full lockdown at this point, and what they were doing was full-on illegal. Even so, police told us their hands were tied if they would not open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker, and so I have no problems looking up information and calling around to look for help. And this is what I did. Most places, like student unions, police, and town hall, were understanding, but they couldn't really do much. So I acted on the suggestion of the upstairs neighbor and contacted one of the girls' deans. I shot him a nice email about sorry to have bothered him and taking up his time, but I had this big group of students from his faculty ganging up every night, and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID rule that existed at that time. Especially since me and my neighbor were about to go to the papers with this story, as secret lockdown parties were becoming a thing in the papers at this point. This dean called me back right away, and we had a nice talk about our problems. He told me he was on it. So basically what he did was call the law student girl and her parents. Big drama ensued, and we finally got to sit down with the girls, and they finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed, for which I had no patience, to be honest. And we learned that the police had actually been inside a few times, and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were 300 euros each a pop, so I had no idea why they didn't just stop. We learned they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. To which I said, well, there's your problem. You're still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 every day, and you girls haven't been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge, and we got to vent, but we kept it kind of nice and parted in good terms, hoping that this would be it and we could live together as nice neighbors. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be here, right? You'd think that they would have gotten the point now and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you'd be wrong. Basically what they did was they moved to the frat house across the street and started partying there. There were slightly less people running to and fro, but the noise was still a problem, and we were now in the middle of the second COVID wave, and these people were meeting up with big groups like crazy, while I hadn't seen a soul in almost a year. Never mind the people at my work who were forbidden from even going to their own friggin' family. The whole thing was just ridiculous. My upstairs neighbor happened to film such a party across the street and had sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story, but we weren't really sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our country to test the waters. It got quite some comments and upvotes, and it seemed that most people were also sick of people disregarding the rules and having secret parties. After some talks with the upstairs neighbor, we decided to contact the press and simultaneously go up a step in the university hierarchy and contact the vice rector that had the power to start up a disciplinary case against the students. Now this person is one of 12 vice rectors for a total campus of about 15,000 students, so quite high up. Things moved fast. Local news actually picked up our story from Reddit and contacted me, and we gave some background info. They confirmed with the police that cops had been there dozens of times to their address and across the street and weren't let in most of the time. We mentioned that the university was involved and that we had hoped they would finally intervene. The next day, the piece was on their website. It went viral there and got promoted to the sites of most national newspapers. Its headline was sensational enough, mentioning the dozens of times police had showed up and also mentioning how healthcare workers were being kept up by selfish students. At the same time, the vice rector contacted us to take our statements, which we had already prepared up on paper, and informed us that they would investigate and could possibly start up disciplinary actions. At the same time, more reporters were contacting me throughout the day, and we made sure to mention that to her and link the university the printed articles. The next day, while at work, I got a message from the upstairs neighbor that a film crew from the national news was at our doorstep. He declined to talk to them, and I would have done the same since this was getting pretty big now, but they made a segment anyway. Yeah, and sure enough, that night at 7, here was my street and a short section about cops standing in front of a closed door a dozen times, and the local press cop talking about the troubles of closed doors. Best part about it was that a student from the offending frat house across the street had let the film crew in, and had said on camera exactly what we were accusing them of towards the university, that they had been having parties and didn't let the cops in, and that they had done it multiple times. No idea what made him think that was a good idea. Anyway, trying not to make a huge story even longer, the press died down sometime later, thank goodness, and the disciplinary action from the university went through. Before the hearing, we sat down with the girls from our block and cleared some things up. We wanted to live like normal people together, and we tried to make some amends. Because we put in a kinda good word for them, they got the lighter end of the stick. 40 hours of community service and some probation. The guys across the street got 80 hours each, and each had to write us a letter of apology, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading every time I got one. The sad part is, most of them sounded just like dumb young kids, but that was after getting called out on the news and being part of a disciplinary action. But we never wanted to escalate things this far. Some noise is to be expected when living in the same building, and we were never going to these extremes for some expected noises. But these people went to the extremes, and so we were forced to do the same. The rest of the year, a simple message on WhatsApp was enough to silence any noises we had coming from their apartment. If anything, I hope they learned that even very polite and chilled people can become very upset when presented with sleep deprivation and excessive noise. My HOA complaint inadvertently broke up an entitled mother Karen's marriage by Moonbeam19. Do dog moms count? This happened a few years ago, but I still think about it. After being blessed with great neighbors over the years, I then started taking it for granted. And then Luna, her 4 dogs, all the same breed, and family, 2 teens and a husband, move in the house next door. It started off well enough. Luna was friendly and the kids and the husband seemed nice. But she soon decided that the best place for her dogs to go potty was my backyard. I didn't agree, and after suffering in silence for a few weeks, I'm not very confrontational, I finally told her that my backyard wasn't her personal dog park. When they got home from work, they would let their dogs loose to go running in my backyard to play and go potty. One day, I happened to catch them and came out on my patio to tell them to cut it out. The dogs turned around and started running towards me while barking aggressively. Fortunately, her husband called them off before the little ankle biters got to me. And it wasn't just the dog that liked to hang out in my backyard. Luna liked to walk around my backyard while talking on her phone. One of the things I like about my house is the privacy. It backs to woods, so I don't have a lot of curtains on my back windows and doors. But since Luna liked walking around my yard, I was forced to curtail my habit of cleaning while scantily dressed. And it was creepy. Once, after it had snowed, I realized that someone had walked up to my back patio and had been peeping in my French doors. Not long after, someone left a gift of junk on my front porch welcome mat. Geez, wonder who did that. But then, Luna seemed to want to repair our rather rocky relationship and asked me what time I got off work. We could do cocktails and hang out. I thought, whatever, Karen. So I told her, but no get-together ever materialized. I realized later that she just wanted to know what time I got home from work. What she didn't know was that I sometimes worked at home. On one of those days, I caught her once again letting the dogs loose in my yard. So I took a photo and I sent it to the HOA. I think she was also sneaking her dogs into my other neighbor's fenced backyard. The ramifications were swift. That complaint was the straw that broke the camel's back. The marriage was already on shaky ground, and the husband was tired of her and her dog hoarding. I only saw 4 dogs at the time, but there were more I didn't notice because they all looked alike. The next thing I knew, she and the dogs had moved back to South America. The kids went to live with relatives and go to college, and the husband was acting like someone who won the lottery. He always seemed somewhat grumpy before, but after she left, he was smiling and friendly. And then he bought a Harley, got a girlfriend, and proceeded to rid the house of copious amounts of urine-stained carpets. He was eventually evicted from the house, yes, they were renters, because the owners were sick of the complaints and the fines and decided to move back in. Luna had apparently a gift for ticking off the neighbors on my block. The weird thing is that there were a couple of vacant lots and a dog park less than a block away, but apparently her neighbors' yards were the best place to take her dogs. I gotta know, do you agree with this comment? A lot of municipalities limit the number of adult dogs to a certain amount. Where I grew up, it was 3. She's also lucky the dogs weren't shotgunned for their aggression on someone else's property. This happened 12 years ago, and I am still reaping my rewards. I worked for the company. They did 3-phase photography, family and children photography, no wedding or events or anything, just straight up studio work that was in a portable setting. Sittings booked for 10 minutes, and we were supposed to shoot 30 to 50 a day. Yes, it is as wretched of a job as it sounds. It was fast, high energy, and at times simply brutal. 1. Pre-seller. They come in 2 to 3 weeks in advance and sell a special 10 by 13 portrait and book the appointment. 2. The photographer, that's me in this instance, comes in for about a week and takes the pictures. And 3. The salesperson returns 2 weeks later with the special along with the other 6 poses I took and tries to sell you $400 worth of pictures. I was very good at what I did. The company's sales average was $100 per customer per 50 customers. The more you shoot, the lower your quality because you spend less time taking care of details, and details sell pictures. My average was $175-ish per 150 to 200 customers. I was making this company a lot of money, and they consistently treated me like crap. Oh, the stories. Their business model was shoot as many sittings as you can, as fast as you can. To them, shooting 50 with a $100 average was better than shooting 35 with a $150 average, even though the profit margin was exactly the same. I never agreed with that, and boss and I went round and round about it every week. They withheld raises because I didn't have enough sittings and took my bonuses because I wasn't meeting their quotas. So I figured out how to be fast, efficient, and dang good. That's another post. So that's the background. Now the good stuff. Enter the jerk. The jerk is a pre-seller who lied to the customers, lied to the store, and would book appointments from 9 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. even though the studio hours were 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. He told every lie in the book, and I think he even added a few of his own. Want to bring your dog? Family of 15? Sure, bring 5 changes of clothes and I'll even have her do your makeup. I don't even do my own makeup. Come and get your picture taken and we'll throw in a free toaster. And just to make it interesting, he would triple and quadruple book appointments, and when he ran out of those, he would sell open appointments and tell people to just come in anytime and my photographer will work you in. Oh, just writing that makes me mad after all these years. The biggest problem was he would waive the sitting fee or just not tell him. I was obligated to collect that $8. Every time I didn't, it came out of my check and it was a freaking nightmare. I refused to work behind the jerk for these and 1,000 other reasons. I told boss that if they ever put me behind the jerk again, I would quit. Which is exactly what happened. They knew he had been working at the store I was assigned, and they lied about it. I immediately called boss and told him this was my last week and that he needed to make arrangements to get the photography equipment at the end of the shoot. I should have walked out, but I was young and dumb. It was a 3-day shoot, and I shot 316 customers by myself. That is an insane amount of sittings, and nobody was happy. Every night, the store manager had to tell my customers to leave because the store was closed. People were lined up at 9 a.m. waiting for me. I took so much abuse that week. After a customer threw a shoe at me and another spit on my pizza, the store security guard brought a chair over and he stayed with me almost the entire time I was there. I honestly can't remember how many people were escorted out of the store because they acted a fool in my studio. It's been over a decade and I still have nightmares about that week. But nobody came to get the equipment, so I start making phone calls and plotting. I say, hey, so what do you want me to do with your equipment? Boss says, you're gonna need it next week in Florida. No, because I quit. You didn't give me any notice, so I am not accepting your resignation. I am sending you to Florida next week. Hey, I'm an independent contractor, remember? You can't make me go to Florida. This is not complicated. I quit. That's another post. Just go to Florida. I don't have any time for this now. You can quit in 3 weeks if you can hire a replacement. And he hangs up. Nope, not going to Florida. I packed the equipment and took it home with me. The camera was a brand new Canon T2i 550D, and those were pricey back in 2010. I really didn't want to give it back, but it wasn't mine to keep. I had an idea. Boss was an absolute train wreck of a human. If he didn't want to do something, he wouldn't. If he could find someone else to do it, he would. I decided to use his own worst traits against him: avoidance and procrastination. The next thing I did was take the company credit card and go to the nearest storage unit with climate control. I rented a unit and paid for the first month, but just one. I unloaded it all, down to the last halogen light bulb. I took detailed pictures of everything and an inventory. I locked the door and I walked away. At this point, there was nothing I could do but wait and hope that Boss would continue to be the worthless wreck I knew him to be. Next, I called and reported the card stolen. Why? Well, because I knew if I didn't, that card would remain active and rent would be paid every month on time, and that just wasn't going to work for me. I cut it in half and sent it and the combination to the storage locker to Boss via FedEx, along with a hand-painted sign that said, "I quit." I also sent an email to HR telling them that I was terminating my contract and that Boss had the information on the equipment. This is probably the only sketchy thing that I did. The person I emailed was out on medical leave, and I knew it. I could have sent that email to a dozen other people who work there, but they might have paid attention to it. By the time she got back to the office, she had so many emails she couldn't even begin to tackle them all. A month goes by and the police knock on my door. Okay, so I wasn't expecting that. The company has reported the equipment stolen and the police are there to investigate. I really thought I was going to jail. The cop that knocked on the door was fully expecting to take me away in handcuffs until I explained what was going on. I ended up taking copies of the emails to the police department, as well as my copy of the contract with the storage unit. I also had a copy of the shipping label. Both my name and the company were listed on the contract. I had to make an official statement and jump through some hoops, and the company had placed a monetary value of $12,000 on the studio rig, so potentially I was in a lot of trouble. Except I covered my butt. The police told me I was in the clear because the storage unit had their name on the contract, their credit card was used to pay for it, and I had sent the combination and all the pertinent information to the company. I am very good at CYBWP, cover your butt with paper. At this point, I figure the gig is up because surely they're going to come and get this rig or send someone or something. Nope, Boss is still worthless. 2 more months go by. I get a call from the storage facility and they're about to cut the lock and auction the contents. I just about peed my pants, I was so excited. I called Boss again and he dodged my calls and ignored my emails to please call me immediately. I never specifically stated what I wanted to talk to him about, and just like I was hoping he would, he ignored me. Okie dokie, I've done all that I can. And that's when it all started to come together. And then I hit a pretty good snag, but it actually worked out better in the end. In this state, if a storage unit goes up for sale, the owner cannot purchase it at an auction. I didn't know that. But where there's a will, there's a way. They sent letters and called 3 more times, and then the date was set. The unit went up for auction on my birthday. My neighbor went to the sale and he bought the unit for $125, and I almost died. And of course, we were in cahoots on this, but we had to make it look like that we weren't. The pistol grip, the camera mounts cost more than that, not to mention the lighting, the props, and the costumes, and of course the camera. My neighbor then put an ad in the local paper for photography stuff, $1,000 firm, but didn't list anything specific, and oops, I put the wrong number in the ad. A week later, he wanted out of his garage, and then he sold it to me for $126. He has a bill of sale from the auction, and I have a bill of sale from him. It is now mine, and there is nothing the company can do about it. But they tried. I now have a fully functional photography studio, all the contacts I need to start my own business, and the skills to do it. I started calling all the stores I'd worked for the last 8 years and offered them a much better deal than what the company was giving them. I did my own pre-selling, my own photography, and my own sales. Except I took it a step further. I bought a monitor and computer and let people preview their pictures and order the day of the shoot. They paid in full and I mailed the pictures directly to them. People loved it. No high-pressure sales, no tricks. My customers were happy and so were my stores. About 6 months after my first independent shoot, I heard from the company. I got several nasty letters from them, which I ignored. Word had gotten back to them that I was using their equipment and that I was working for someone else. I just laughed at them. They thought so little of me that it never occurred to them that it was, well, my business. Then I got a nasty legal letter from a lawyer. It started with cease and desist, rolled into me violating the non-competitor's agreement, and ended with the return of their stolen property. They had apparently not told him all of the facts. I sent him copies of everything. I waited a few weeks for a response from him, and I heard, well, nothing. I finally called to find out what was going on, but no one was available to take my call. How convenient. A few days later, I got a certified letter in the mail saying, "No other legal action will be forthcoming from this office." I would have been content to just let it slide, but this whole thing ticked me off and now I wanted blood. I made a real effort to really hurt them. Little by little, I built my business and my reputation. I didn't have to do any of the nasty tricks that the jerk did. Within a year, I had stores and schools calling me. I had more work than I could handle on my own, so I took on a second photographer and then a third. I actually hired 4 people out from under their noses. At the height of my business, I had 8 additional photographers and a full-time office assistant. I could have grown much larger, and in hindsight, I am so glad that I didn't. Digital photography was a huge boon to the industry, and then it backfired. I found my niche in the market just as it exploded. I ran the company completely out of 3 states. They lost all of their chain contracts to me, including the store where it all blew up. The jerk lost all of his stores and ended up working at a gas station. The boss ended up demoted because his district was dissolved when I sniped out the contracts. The jerk actually tried to convince one of my photographers to hire him to do the pre-selling for her. By now, my name and my business name had a really good reputation. Boss left the company for good and used me as a personal reference. He was a good photographer, just a rotten manager. And I took great joy in telling the people who called me that I was legally not allowed to tell them what I thought of the man. The age of the cell phone camera pretty much destroyed traditional photography, and I closed my doors as a business in late 2017. The company closed for good in 2016, and I would like to think that I had a hand in that. I'm still standing, and they are nothing but an empty building. I still have that original rig, but the camera has been replaced several times. I do senior pictures and the occasional venue shoot. Most of my photography is for restaurant menus now, and well, people ask me if that's boring. I've never had a meatball scream and cry or kick me, which is pretty much a daily occurrence when you work with kids. This may not be as epic as some on here, but I beat them at their own game, and that still feels pretty dang good. Sued the HOA president. He keeps finding me, so I ruin his HOA. Click the video on your screen so you get this awesome story, and I'll see you there.